Okay guys, we're here with our 68 Charger. We installed a full QA1 Level 2 suspension kit. We're gonna show you a little bit of the differences of the stock stuff we pulled out versus this really nice QA1 stuff. We're gonna talk about the front, the back, the steering, and then we're gonna hop in a car that has stock stuff and drive it back to back with this car as a comparison. So all this stuff we pulled out of the car, it's basically original 68 stuff. Some of it's not even serviced. All these bushings are all cracked and rotted. Tons of grease caked up. You can see the stamped steel factory K-member is big and heavy. This had torsion bars. You can see we had the torsion bars pulled out here. So the spring rate is dictated by the torsion bars, whereas this is now all coilover. So you can see a lot of the suspension pickup points are also different. This car used like basically a strut rod to locate the control arms here. The bottom control arms only had one pickup point here. These are now like A-arms. So basically this has dual A-arms, like dual wishbone A-arms. Hey Rocco. And then we have the coilovers and the sway bar. It's all integrated into the QA1 stuff. It's all beefier. But the biggest thing is the access from this tubular K-member. It bolts to the stock pickup points. One thing I noticed that was a pleasant surprise that I didn't plan for is how much easier it is to work on your engine and access things with this setup. The only big change we had to do to the engine was this oil pan. We swapped to like a mid-mount road race oil pan, which is actually good because it has added baffling. Now that we have more cornering abilities, better handling, we're going to see more lateral load on the car, which the internal baffling in the oil pan is really going to help not starve the pickup for the oil pump. And then the rack and pinion. So this made a really big difference as well. Normally there's a giant steering box. It's heavy and it's integrated into the K-member. And this gets rid of all that. The rack and pinion is nice and compact. It steers good. And we did just a slight modification to the steering column to get that in. But I really like the packaging with all this. It's more simple. There's a lot more adjustability on the arms. You can see all the ends are adjustable for alignment on the upper and lower arms. You can see the coilovers have adjustable ride height. They're also dual adjustable. And you can see kind of the bump steer correction for the rack and pinion for the tie rod ends. We also went ahead and threw some big Wilwood brakes on this car. Because we have a revised spindle, these are kind of like a Mustang 2 brake setup, which you can get really huge rotors and brakes for, which is what we did. Got away from the drum brake setup, got away from all the sloppy old tie rod stuff. I think the only thing that was not factory on this original setup was somebody changed the inner tie rod ends, and this car was not pleasant to drive. I drove it very shortly with the original stuff, and it was like a tuna boat basically. So this made a huge difference in the front. And then let's go to the back because there was big changes done to the back too. So the biggest major thing is we got rid of the leaf springs. This now has a QA1 4-link kit. So the brackets for these lower arms bolt into the factory leaf spring mounts. And then we welded the upper brace into the car up for the upper shock mount and then the upper link mounts. We also pulled out the 8 3/4 rear end, went ahead and welded all the tabs for the upper links on it. And during that time, we upgraded the bearings too. So all the packaging is nice and compact here. All these brackets come from QA1 and they bolt right into the leaf spring pads. So it makes it very simple as far as setup. The uppers are adjustable, so you can adjust your pinion angle and it triangulates so that you get rid of the side-to-side axle movement. Something I noticed a lot on these leaf spring cars with the shackles, you can almost watch the rear end move side to side when you're cornering. This car doesn't do that at all. So you're also able to put a bigger tire in the wheel well without as much movement and tire rub issues. So that's a plus. The adjustability of the coilovers and the ride height. Another big thing with the Mopars too is the adjustability of the upper and lower control arms to set where your wheel is centered in the wheel well. So you can actually run this whole axle in and out and get your wheel really centered in the wheel well. It makes the car just look just right and it helps with the handling a little bit. But really happy with all this stuff that a lot of it bolts in. We welded the upper in, but you could bolt that in as well. And then welded the tabs in, but really something that's not that difficult to install for the major differences that you're getting and the major handling characteristics that are going to be upgraded. So with that being said, we're going to jump into a stock one, see how it feels, see how it corners. These cars were not designed to be sports cars, so nothing impressive really to talk about there, but we're going to see the difference that all this really cool hardware makes. All right guys, we're pulling out. So what we're doing today in this 70 Charger is going on a quick little drive just around the area. nothing too crazy. But what we're wanting to do today is showcase the difference between a factory suspension and then a full QA1 tubular suspension that we did on the 68. So this Charger that I'm in right now has all factory front and rear suspension. The only difference I think this car has is the rear has been shackled up like they did in the 70s. They basically make the rear shackles really long to get that rake, I guess you would call it. It's kind of like up in the rear stance that was real popular in the 70s. And that helps, like, I guess they would fit a real big tire in the back. But right off the bat, okay, so what I'm feeling in this car, we're just going through the parking lot, but this car has almost no road feel. And that was popular back then. I think that the hot ticket for a car back then was like almost a disconnected feeling where you feel like you're floating on a couch. That's kind of what this feels like. And this thing is all fresh factory suspension, so it's not like you're driving a worn out vehicle. But right away you can notice like that was a very slow speed turn. I think it was going 10 miles an hour through that turn, and there's body roll everywhere. Some of that is due to the rear end being so high up on this car. It's just not set up for handling. It rides nice. It's cushiony and floaty like a couch. Like going out of that driveway right there, you don't even feel the big cracks and dips and stuff. This car has a lot of sidewall too on the tire, which adds a lot of deflection between the road and what the car is doing. So also not ideal for handling, but it does ride nice. I will say it's like cushiony, soft. It's kind of what you expect out of a big car, maybe a luxury car. Definitely not a sport car feel. And we're really not going to go too far. I think I'm going to hit an on-ramp. This on-ramp that I've been on before, I noticed that some of these cars, they will like push the front tires, or they will just start body rolling to the point where I'm just not comfortable anymore. And that's just the regular on-ramp getting on the freeway. So we'll do that and see how it behaves. And then we'll hop in the 68 with all the fancy, basically the whole QA1 option book at it. The only thing that Charger has is level 2 coilovers, which are still extremely nice QA1 double adjustables versus like their full almost race type coilover setup, which we will be doing on a future one. But the biggest thing for me, so there's a couple big differences right off the bat, and we'll talk more in depth and show you those exactly. But lack of torsion bars. These cars originally are torsion bar suspension. That means the spring is not a coil like you're used to seeing in the front. It's an actual bar that gets put in a bind, and that twist is what gives you the spring rate. So it has some downsides to it as far as range of motion, adjustability, tunability. It has a plus side that the ride height is a little bit adjustable, easier. Mopar just used that quite a bit. You still almost see it used in some trucks. Trucks still use it a little bit here and there, some heavy duty trucks. I think a lot of that is due to packaging. They're able to run a 4x4 axle shaft past the control arms. All right, so this is like an off camber. Right away, basically this car, that's 20 miles an hour, and the nose is diving. I'm like sliding all over this thing. I'm pitching in a little more. There's stuff sliding around, and the car is wallowing. So basically, I'm like, let me move all this stuff around. So basically, the car just wallowed in and out of the turn with a little bit of input, and that's because of how the shock and springs are reacting. Not good, not really confidence inspiring. I'm gonna get back off. This is a 10 mile per hour exit with like kind of a tight turn. So you'll be able to see again. I'm like having to hold on to stuff in this car because it's just so, it's like unpredictable. It's pushing the tires. I gotta like really work this thing. And it comes out of the turn not very well. It's a handful right here. Nothing that's like predictable in the way you want. This car, driving this reminds me of like, if you watched any of the Dukes of Hazzard stuff, I mean, the car is like body rolling like crazy. It's dramatic looking. Same thing in the Bullet movies. It's dramatic looking what these cars do from the outside, but it is not the fast way to do things. It's not the smooth or safe way to do things. It's just what they had back then. This car is a little bit wider tire, but not sticky tires. You know, I drove that 68 that we're about to hop in on stock suspension, and I didn't need to go very far to know that it wasn't a car that I even really wanted to throw through a turn. It was on 14-inch tires. I think they were like maybe 205 wide, so really skinny tiny tire for that car. Just not fun to drive. I mean, like I said, it felt okay in a straight line and slow. It felt comfortable, but not anything compared to a modern car. I mean, you could get into like the lowest end base car, and you know, performance characteristics of those cars are just up to modern standards. There's a lot they've learned about suspension geometry since then. QA1 has applied all that knowledge, all that engineering that's been learned throughout the years to their kit. So, you know, it's night and day when you get into a car that, you know, everything bolts to the stock chassis. So there's also that. They are working with, you know, basically some confines of a stock unibody car that was designed in the 60s, and upgrading that. But because they're able to like clean slate the K member and do a tubular one with all their own pickup points, makes a big difference. And then the steering. I didn't talk about it too much, but I'm really steering this car quite a bit just to keep it in the lane. This car has a pretty tight steering box. It's all brand new, all the bushings, the end links, everything is brand new. So it's not as bad as some of these that I've driven, like as far as being all over the road. But it's not a rack and pinion. So there's a reason that everything is rack and pinion now. It's just a better road feel. And we'll get into that other car and feel it. But basically, I just wanted to take you on a few tight turns. I don't really need to do anything more in this car to really show what this is doing, like while driving. But just a few quick on ramps and off ramps, so you get an initial driving impression of a stock one. It depends on what you want to do with the car, really. If you're looking for a nostalgic feel of a car that you have to slow down for turns, that's what you get with all the original stuff. Basically, there's just no confidence throwing a car into a turn at any speed. That doesn't mean that you have to be a full-blown Formula One car driver in this. I mean, no matter what you do to one of these chassis, you're still kind of, you know, dealing with like a unibody from a car that was designed in the 60s. Like I would venture to say there was not even a lot of computer engineering that went into this car. A lot of this stuff was hand-drawn and like physics models in real life, and just things that even an aftermarket company now is way above and beyond what the OE had as far as design capabilities back then. So yeah, that about wraps it up as far as the drive portion. Just a few little turns. I'll take the QA1 equipped 68 on the same course. That car's stick shift, so I might have more fun. But the biggest thing is going to be the dramatic difference in body roll and the compliance through a turn and the way the car reacts. I noticed in this car, if you're in a turn, you know, the car is loaded up so far one way that if you just try and tighten that turn a little bit, all of a sudden you're like past the limit real quick, or if you correct, the car wallows back and forth both ways. So getting rid of that kind of stuff with modern coilovers, A-arms, a 4-link, just better geometry. That's what we did with the 68. So you'll kind of see that next. All right, now we're in the 68. So this is gonna be like just a direct back-to-back comparison, driving impressions. Right away, pulling out of the driveway, or out of the garage, I should say. One thing I do notice when you get a rack and pinion, and I've noticed it in almost every car I've converted to rack and pinion, is that you maybe get a little bit reduced turning radius. So that's just one of those things. It's not noticeable until you drive them back to back, but some of that is due to just geometry of a rack and pinion. Some of it too is, you know, I have a wider wheel, like more aggressive wheel and tire combo on this car. So, you know, to tuck it all into the fender, you're gonna get a reduced turning radius. But even just going through this turn, where we did that before, in the other car, the body roll was significant and noticeable. Coming out of this driveway was like not even very noticeable in the other car. This car, you can feel every crack that it's going over. You can feel what it's doing, which is what you want, kind of. Like, you kind of want to feel what a car is doing when it's on the road. And that's something that is a big difference between modern cars and 60s cars, is they were almost maybe targeting like a less road feel, like more of a floaty deal. Not good for performance handling. I guess just good for comfort. So both these cars are 440 powered cars. I don't know what the horsepower in the other one is. On this drive, I guess it doesn't really matter because we're not really getting too aggressive. Right off the bat, this one's more fun with the Silver Sport 6-speed. It's just more fun. That's all there is to it. Both of these are also 4-wheel disc brake cars, so stopping feels fine. They're both power disc brake cars. The steering is much tighter too. Like, you can let go of the wheel in this car comfortably and it holds its lane. You know, the alignment specs too. This thing has more capability as far as the alignment specs. There's a lot of stuff with steering correction that people have really worked on classic Mopars. I see guys doing custom brackets to drop where your tie rod ends connect to kind of improve steering geometry. All that stuff's kind of built into this system. It's just a fresh, clean slate. It's got tubular upper and lower arms, whereas the stock stuff is like a big, heavy stamped single control arm lower with a strut rod to locate it fore and aft, whereas this is a dual wishbone type. So it's just a lot stronger and it just has more capability. I'm gonna get on this same on-ramp. There's like a really slow truck in front of me, so I'm gonna give them an opportunity to kind of catch up. But with this car, right away, you pitch it in. I think I was going 25 right there, no problem. There's a trash truck in front of me, so they're going like 4 miles an hour, which is crazy. So yeah, terrible comparison because I have like 2 big rigs in front of me just doing their thing. And then I have a stoplight here, so I didn't get to go through that turn the same way. Maybe I'll get off the freeway and try it again. Even getting up to speed on the freeway and negotiating lane changes, a lot more confidence inspiring in this car, which is good because when you're rowing these gears, you don't really have a lot of time to be like managing the steering wheel the way I had to in the other car. I'm already like twice the speed of the other car through this turn. Not a lot of drama coming out of the turn right there. Just no problem managing that turn. That was like a tighter radius turn and no big deal. I have a modern Tahoe in front of me. The speed limit's 30 on this turn. Even that big SUV is barely managing it. I don't have like super supportive seats in either one of these cars. These are original seats. That other one was a bench seat. This one is like a split bench that doesn't have a lot of bolstering. So with the other car with the added body roll, I really felt like it was physically pitching me off to the side. Whereas this one, the car is planted, but it's like the actual G-forces that are like sliding me out of the seat. So it's a little bit different. So we'll get on another on-ramp. Not the same on-ramp, but this car can handle a little more. So you kind of have to like push it a little harder so you guys can even see. Just lack of drama going through this turn. Big sweeping right-hand turn to get on the freeway. The car is planted. I'm one-handed with it. No drama. It does whatever I want. So it's almost a safety thing too to be able to get up to freeway speed. You know, California has really short on-ramps with tight turns. So sometimes you have to be able to take those on-ramps at a little higher speed. I've had modern trucks that feel like they're just, you know, not able to go any higher speed through an on-ramp because there's just so much body roll. And then you have to really like floor it to get up to freeway speeds once you do get on the freeway. This car, no problem. So a lot of advantages. You know, without having like a slalom course back to back, these are just public roads. This is just feel of the pants type stuff. But the road compliance, I just like the way this car drives better. The other car maybe has less, not even a bumpy ride, but you don't feel what's going on the road because it's absorbing so much. But it's also taking away from the road feel. Whereas this car is kind of point and shoot. You know what's going on. You feel the unevenness of the road. But you need to feel that. That's compliance, basically. That's showing you that the car is working in a different way. Like with this setup, the shocks, the coilovers are doing all the work, whereas with the other setup, as far as taking the turn, a lot of the loads and the dynamics are transferred through. Even the unibody of the car is probably twisting a lot. You know, there's a lot of body roll. The tires are absorbing a lot. So it's a totally different feel when your suspension is actually working. It's 100 times more predictable because you know exactly what your spring rate is. You know what your rebound adjustments are on your shocks. So you know what your suspension as far as the coilover is doing. You get a stock suspension and there's a lot of unsprung factors that are actually doing load dynamic stuff, and it's super unpredictable. That's where you get that wallowing, that weight transfer that's just kind of unpredictable. And with that other car, I didn't feel like I could turn in harder because it just felt like it was either going to push the front tires or body roll too much. Whereas this car right now, it also has sticky tires. The public on-ramps I was on right now felt like I could just keep pushing this car and it was hooked up. And I turned in a little harder mid-turn and it just bit. It just took it, it dove in and bit in. We have a good alignment on this. I think we have a little bit of camber, almost 2 degrees of camber, which is a pretty aggressive alignment, but it helps with that turn in. It's like very, very crisp. Something you just don't expect in a giant car like this. Some of the differences too, we have a lot lower ride height. So like navigating these driveways, you have to use a little more caution. But the lower ride height, so I guess it helps a little bit with center of gravity. But the stance is just so aggressive looking. It looks amazing on this car. That's one thing. The stance between the two cars is night and day. So that's about it. We're back in the office parking lot. Kind of fun to do like a back-to-back comparison where I literally just jump out of one, jump in the next one, take the same road. The one thing that just stood out to me just right now is that this car, it was like the on-ramp where I really felt the body roll and the suspension working on the other car felt like nothing in this car. It was so anticlimactic that I wanted to just go take another on-ramp. So that's a big difference. I found a better on-ramp with more speed and more of sweeping turn to go take in this car. So that's something that tells you right off the bat, even in a side-by-side comparison, what was almost too much for the red car was not enough for this car. So I think that alone says it all.